friends. Welcome to a new episode of Merging Minds powered by BureauWorks. I'm super excited today. I am always super excited because I really love to bring you stories, leadership stories, and bring you figures from the localization industry that have beautiful stories to tell, human stories to tell. And today, I said that I'm super excited, but I am extremely excited because I have my good friend Kathleen Bostick today. Hi, Kathleen. How are you doing?
I'm great, Javi. Good to see you.
Where are you dialing from today?
I'm from McKinney, Texas, which is about 30 minutes north of Dallas, Fort Worth.
All right, all right. So, for those who don't know Kathleen yet, which I think is difficult if you're in the localization industry, let me read you her bio. Kathleen is a localization industry strategist and senior consultant. Prior to her current role, she spent 7 years as executive vice president of SDL North America, managing the sales and operations teams focused on helping global companies deliver world-class digital experience to their customers. She has over 25 years of experience in our industry, and this is beautiful, but what are your hobbies? You gotta tell us about your hobbies a little bit. This is the formal introduction.
Exactly. Yeah. You want the real backstory, right? Yeah. What it doesn't talk about there is I'm a foster mom. I've had fostered over 28 dogs in the last 4 years, and I managed only to keep two, which is pretty big because you
Boy,
can't get all of them, and the rest all got adopted. So that's a little bit of my backstory. And I also come from a family of five girls. So I've been very passionate about supporting women in leadership because I grew up with all girls. I told Javi earlier, we were Eanes, Maureen, Kathleen, Noreen, Eileen, and Colleen. And my dad used to kid that the next two were going to be gasoline and kerosene.
oh,
So good thing there were
was
no
there
more.
any trouble to go for dinner, to call you all for dinner? Did you miss
Oh,
any meals? All right, hey guys, did I miss any meals?
he never called us by the right names. We always had the wrong names. Yes. And then I've got two daughters and then I've got two granddaughters. So my passion for promoting and supporting and inspiring women really stems around my upbringing. And my dad, he was a great role model and supporter. He was also a mentor of mine. And so I think that he's helped shape my career and also my leader, how I lead people.
That's great. That's beautiful. And I invited you today because I'd be very happy if you share with us your journey, your experience, what you've done today. Because Merging Minds is about bringing those human stories, those great leadership stories, those people that have really great stories to tell, to share. And we're gonna go. I have some questions prepared for you. But the first one I want to ask is like, because you talk to a lot of folks in the industry, and you always ask, how did you got into this industry? Did you stumble upon it? Were you a translator? How did you find this industry?
And that's really funny because I was so far away from the language industry. I had spent almost 9 years at the railroad industry. I mean, you want to talk about a old school industry. And I worked my way up to be the most senior woman in the railroad. As a matter of fact, I even wrote the dress code for women to wear pants. So I'm really dating myself. There was a time where we couldn't wear pants, yes. So anyway, I was at the top of my game in the railroad. I was in Trains magazine. We'd closed the largest deal in the history of the railroad. And I looked around and I thought, okay, now what? I'm bored out of my mind. I'm not going to break the glass ceiling. So it's time to do something else. So at the time, they had ads in newspapers. So there was an ad in the paper for VP of marketing and sales at a company called ILE, who most people will have never heard of. And it was a localization company started by a husband and wife, Dina and Bernard Bennett. And so I joined them as head of marketing and sales. I knew nothing about language. I speak a little French, but I'm not a linguist. But it was all about sales and marketing. So I spent my first 9 months there, and I went to it was a STC conference at the time; those were popular. And I went to the conference, and I met Nick Pollard, and so he planted a seed, and I thought, I think I'm ready for a change because there were things at ILE that needed to change and I couldn't influence. So I reached out to the head of SDL, who was Mark Lancaster, who was the CEO, and I said, hey, I understand you want somebody in North America to run your sales and marketing. I'm interested. And he copied me by mistake on an email that said, are you sure she doesn't want just a free trip to the UK? I'm dead serious. That's how my career started at SDL.
This is very interesting because when you talk to folks in our industry, like I would say 80% of the people just stumbled upon it. They don't know anything. And I really like as well, like, hey, I'm not that young also. And I remember the ads on the newspapers to help me out. Today, this morning, I was hearing a podcast about how Kiss got created. And the original Kiss went out of like it was Peter, like the drummer, what's the name of the drummer? I forgot the name of the drummer. Anyway, he was the original drummer, put an ad on the newspapers, and both I forget the names of all of them. They went to the ad and they created Kiss, right? Like
It's
they,
crazy. It's
yeah.
totally,
So
yeah.
I
So
those things work and stuff. And you know another thing about that, and it's like, I'm sure we will go through it during the talk and stuff. And I was talking to another really well experienced leader in our industry, and once I wanted to be like different, so like what you guys did in the past doesn't work anymore. And he said something that is very interesting about sales and marketing. It's like the sales techniques, tactics, the marketing, it's all the same. The only thing that has changed is the channel, right? So
that's a really good point. Yes, I agree with that.
yeah, so let me like, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for letting us know how you stumbled upon the industry. And now I want you to tell us a story, and I want you to go back and look back on your trajectory in your career and think of a defining moment that set you on the path that you are now. Can you share one of those?
Sure. I was when I joined SDL, nobody knew me and nobody knew SDL. And in the railroad industry, there is no cold calling because you're either on a railroad or you're not. So sales is very different. So I learned how to cold call. I'd never cold called in my life, but I figured if I don't pick up the phone, I'm not going to have a job. So that's how I learned how to build a company by dialing for dollars, which was really scary. And so what I found out over time though is that I had to keep I didn't ever want to be known as a salesperson, but I had to keep building relationships. And a defining moment for me at SDL was 5 months in when I got a call from a company called EDS, which was a massive company at the time, and they had a project for me that was going to be going into Japanese. And I picked up the phone and I was available, and we thought it was going to be $5,000, the documentation project. I didn't care. It'd be my very first customer. And then once we heard more about it, it turned out it was $1 million project. And if you think about it, at the time, SDL was only $4 million. And we only had 40 employees. $1 million project was massive. So that was a defining moment because honestly, if I did not win that deal, I probably would have gone back to the railroad and given up. But that made me say, okay, you know what? This is interesting. I can make some money here. I'm going to stay on this path. So from there, we started to build our team. We started to hire people in North America, and we started to grow. And over the next, well, that was in 96. In 1999, SDL IPO'd. At the time, we were only $18 million, but most of that growth came from North America. It was such an important part of the company's growth from the very beginning.
I love how you mentioned this is defining moment, and also that a big part of getting to where you are was you learn to cold call. Cold call today is 2024. It's something that people barely do now today. People we don't pick up the phones when they receive a call from somebody they don't know. But what I appreciate, and I think it's interesting, is the overcoming the fear of rejection that comes out of all of that, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you're 100% right. I mean, that was my biggest fear was making those phone calls. And it's never fun, but you have to, if you're in sales, you have to take a leap of faith and not fear rejection. And I'll never forget this one time I kept calling this person in Arizona, and she'd never pick up the phone, never pick up the phone. And the one time she finally picked up the phone, my dogs were barking in the background. And I thought, okay, you know what? It's just never going to happen. So we're going to move on.
Yeah,
But
that was back in the day. There was no work from home. Like it was pre-pandemic world. Nobody knew that we were gonna be at home for 2 years with kids. Those who have them, partners, right? So
yeah, we were just a little company. I was the only employee. We didn't have an office. So eventually, I think about a year after I was at STL, we started our first all office, which was in Dallas. And then we started to grow from there. But you're right, working from home wasn't a thing. So I had to hide the fact that I was home with my dogs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm probably in the first third of my career, still early 40s now, and I see now, and I don't want to sound like I'm anywhere or anybody, right? But I see that a lot of a big part of who I am now and how I am now is thanks to the setbacks that I faced, that I saw, that I had to live and to go through, right? After learning the skills, or some of the skills that I have now, and the best is the ones that are gonna come, right? But I think setbacks set us on on a right course, right? Can you share with us on that trajectory of yours any setback you can think of? Like, wow, on top of that priority moment that changed everything, I can think of this setback that always made me like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've all had setbacks and you have to bounce back from there. I'll never forget when I was courting this one company in Dallas, and I'm not going to say who it is, but they were bought by somebody later. And they told me, okay, I was going to get these two languages, and I knew a competitor was going to get these other languages. And so they were flying to the UK to check out SDL's operations. And then from there, they were going to fly to the other companies to check out their operations. So, in typical British style, they flew over, but I was not allowed to go with them because it was a money thing, right? We had a small budget. And so they had lunch over there, and it wasn't what I would call what a US client would expect as a welcome to try to win over a new business. So from there, they flew to Dublin, and they were greeted by my competitor, who whisked them off to a fabulous place in Dublin called Johnny Fox's, which still exists, for a night of partying and dancing and singing all the Irish songs. They had the time of their life. The next day, they went in to see the facility in Dublin. And when they came back, I called. So when's the project starting? What's going to happen? No, ghosted me. A month later, they finally told me that they'd given all their business to my competitor. I was gutted. But lesson learned. I never had clients from the US go over without being accompanied by somebody from the US to be their host. And then we always had a plan. So whether it was to go down to London to see the wheels, see the London Bridge, everything, we had a plan. So it was a lesson learned, and we devastating, but move on.
yeah, like that human touch. I mean, we always think. I mean, like, I think you when we in the previous talks, you always mentioned the importance of human interaction, of human there, of being there. That's was there, that is there, and that is always going to be there, no matter what the thing is. And I think this story that you mentioned as well probably taught you a lot of like, hey, I need to be more with the people, right? And then
Yeah.
like
I
a
had the relationship. They didn't know anybody over in the UK. I had the relationship, the importance, and that was a huge deal. It was multi-million-dollar deal that was lost. I don't think their capabilities were any better. It was just the first impression that was made and the relationship that was developed.
You've been in the industry for in the 90s, in the 2000s, in the 10s, right? And
Almost,
in
yeah, 96, 95 was my first time. So almost 30 years. So long time. I've gotten to see huge changes and evolution in the industry. It's been pretty incredible.
I love it. And like I want to ask you, like, in your opinion, what are the biggest misconceptions about the localization industry that you've had to debunk through these years, through the decades? And what was it in the 90s, or what is it now?
Well, I think a lot of people still believe, well, back then, that there was a lot of manual effort with the translators. And now it's become so automated with software, and it's not near the manual process. But the process is much more sophisticated. So when you tell people you work for a localization or a translation agency, their perception is not very, it's more like a back shop kind of green eye shades job used to be. And now people recognize that as a global world, this function, taking things into multiple languages and everything, it just doesn't begin with English, is so much more important than they thought about in the past. I mean, it's been a very interesting ride because when I first joined, translation memory was just invented. Trados was just out there. Everyone was really scared of translation memory. The jobs it was going to take, what it was going to do to the industry, nobody wanted to use it, nobody knew how to price it. And then within the next 5 years, everybody was using translation memory. And then MT came along and translation management systems came along. And all the evolution has been lots of technology over time. And now everyone uses MT. That's just a matter of fact. And now with AI, that's the next big revolution we're all seeing. I think we're all nervous about how it's going to impact our business because we're going to see cannibalization of some of the existing business that we have, consolidation going on. The tools are going to start changing. They are changing. So I think it's very exciting. On the other hand, it's also very scary. So I think
Yeah,
we're in for a bit of a ride here.
I like one thing, and I am a millennial, and one of the things I always, excuse me, I always praised about our generation, that I think we've been forced to have more than any other generations, is flexibility. Like we've been forced to be flexible, especially in the early years of our careers. So this thing that you were discussing, that you were telling us about right now, about how one thing was back in the day, how another thing is now. How another thing. I personally think that the only way of overcoming these things is by being flexible. You have to be. You're not the same person now as you're going to be in 15 years, or the same person that I am now then, right? Why do we still not embrace AI changes or anything? Why is it that difficult for us, for in our industry?
I think everyone's afraid of it, because it's coming so fast. It hit us really fast, and now the evolution, and everyone's worried about their business being cannibalized and changed, but we have no choice. We either change or we die, right? So I've always been an innovator. I love change. I'm a fixer. I've never really liked maintenance mode. So in my career, anytime it got to be a little boring or same old, I would leave and go someplace else because I always liked a new challenge. And I look at this AI evolution, it's a new challenge. And I watch the news, we watch the financial news here and see how it's impacting the stock market and all of the magnificent seven and the top four. And it's pretty incredible the evolution that's taking place. And I listen to some of my younger clients. So I mentor quite a few people, but I also like your generation to mentor me. I think the two-way mentoring is a really great way to learn because I learned from you what your generation's thinking, how you like to be managed. There's a whole different way to approach the next generation than what my generation was. And I think we can really learn from each other. And you can
I,
learn from the ones in their 20s coming up, right?
yeah. I've been, yeah. I've been like I try to advocate a lot in talks that I did, and in events I did for like finishing with ageism. I'm recording this podcast from Japan. I'm in Tokyo right now, and one of the things you see here is the value that the elderly people have here, which in the West we tend not to have as much. I think that's bad. That's bad. I understand as well that in a moment of in a person's growth, you go from being I'm invincible, I'm indestructible, I'm in my 20s, early 30s, whatever, to saying, hey, I'm growing up, and then say, hey, I did it, right? And I'm still capable. And I think uh, this two-way mentoring thing, if everyone could do a little bit of this, it will help finishing this form of discrimination, for example. Right? It would help in better communication, intergenerational communication, and in much better uh, growth for both people, right? And
Yeah, I
this thing.
agree.
So
But one of the things you were asking me about were some of the hiccups in my career. And oh, sorry, there's some really bad thunderstorm here in Dallas. So we have them along with tornadoes. I don't think there's going to be a tornado today, but we've got thunderstorm.
keep
But
there,
at one point in my career, I was at a stall. I was at Lionbridge and I was stalled out. And I thought, okay, I'm getting bored. I need something new. I'm not being challenged. So I well, and did another very impulsive thing. I met somebody, a CEO of a startup on a plane, okay, who then offered me a job to come take a job in Portland, completely outside the industry. Again, like I had left the railroad and come to language, completely out of the industry. I moved to Portland. I was there for probably 6 months and I realized, oh my gosh, what mistake I made. I loved the language industry. I missed all my people, my friends. The first thing I did when I realized it was an moment is I reached out to Ulrich at Loc and I said, I see what Loc going to be in Seattle. I'm in Portland. I need to come back and I need to start my networking process to get back because this is a disaster. And so I went back. I saw all my old friends, and before I knew it, I ended up back at Lionbridge. They wanted me back, and I was really grateful. And I came back in a different role. I came back to run marketing, which I
You're
had.
talking to somebody that came back to the company that
Yeah,
really loved and that
not a
really
bad
felt.
thing, right?
Not that
Sometimes
happen.
you
That
have
doesn't happen
to
that
be a
often.
home
And
screener
that's
on the inside.
and
Yeah,
those human stories they speak a lot about both the employee and the company, and that's something that for us marketing people that helps a lot,
it
right?
does. Yeah. So I went back to Lionbridge, but I was very, very grateful that I was able to go back. And then, I spent 6 more years at Lionbridge. And then I kind of hit a wall and said, all right, I think SDL needs some help. I don't know what's going on in North America, but they can use some help. So I went back to the CEO and said, hey, do you need some help? I'm interested in coming back. And then in 2014, I went back as executive VP in North America to run the team in North America. It was a completely different company than when I left 9 years before. I mean, the evolution was huge, but I was able to come in and see where things were falling down, make corrections, and we turned it around and we grew it over the next 7 years. So I think it's okay to take people back, swallow pride. Everyone's learned lessons from other places, and two of my biggest moves in my career were going back to places I had left.
And you've managed teams through all the companies you've done. You've been able to grow something here, apply there, evolve. And now I want to ask you about this. One of my goals, if I can help this industry, and if I can contribute, is to promote healthy and human ways of leading, of leadership, right? And I invited you to talk here because I know you're one of those people that this is empathetic and has grown from being this type of leader to kind of to evolution, to evolving to who you are today, right? And I want to ask you if you can tell us a little bit about your preferred leadership styles and a little bit about that story, like how it started. Like you stumbled upon it, you will one day somebody said like, "Hey, Kathleen, you gotta deal with these three people now. You deal it," and you were probably I don't know, like you guys gotta do it, whatever. And then you learn that that was not the way of doing it, or how was it? Tell me a little bit about that story. That's very interesting for us to know.
Well, I never really had what I would call leadership training. It was more by I saw the examples of people who led and I liked how they led. And I've always been inclusive. I view I think it's a real testament to your leadership whenever you leave a place and people want to come with you. And people don't come right away, but they eventually come. And when I left SDL, I had some people come to Lionbridge with me. And then when I went back to SDL, after the first year, I was sitting around a table in North America. I guess it was probably the first 2 years. I had 40 people that had come over from Lionbridge with me, and they were in all walks. They were in operations, sales, marketing. And I think that's a real testament to leadership. It's not me saying it, but it's people saying, I like the leadership style. I like working for them. I'm very organized. I have empathy. I manage people differently. What works for one doesn't work the same for another. And I find managing women is very different than managing men. And I remember hearing a story about one of the Olympic soccer teams, and the male coach said that he had to learn to coach these women very different because when he told the guys, in the locker room, oh my gosh, you guys all suck today. It was terrible. They all went, yeah, it wasn't me. He must have because I was great, right? But when you say that to the women, everyone says, oh my God, it's me. I'm the worst. And everybody takes it personally. So I found that I had to manage personalities different and men and with women different along the way with the combination of coaching, mentoring. But then in the end, I had to make tough decisions that I'd had to let people go who weren't performing because in the end, that's what your job is as a manager. And you're going to have performers. I would identify people and say, okay, I've got one A player for every four people I hired. I'd say I'd get one A player out of them, two B players, and one C. C had to go. Everybody needs B players. We need stable B players, solid, and you always want to have that A player. You can't have a team of all A players. It's just impossible. But if you accept the fact that you can have two B players and an A player, and then you have to change out your team, that was a good formula for me. And the hardest people to find, of course, when you're running a sales team are hunters because it is a skill set that you cannot train. And I did go to this conference once, and I remember raising my hand and I said to the guy, okay, how do I turn my farmers into hunters? And he said, you don't.
Is
And I
there
was
isn't it a matter of attitude, or is it an attitude you can train,
like,
or is
genetic.
is genetic? Okay, I love
It's
it.
you are born a hunter, you're born a farmer, and the hunters that I've had work for me, especially at SDL, they were in the software side of the business because the software business is very much you go in, you get a deal, and then you move on. Where the services business, you're very much nurturing because you've got a project and you keep going, you've got a long-term relationship, so it's much more of a nurturing relationship, very different personalities. And I
Hmm.
found that of my teams, I had a lot more men in software sales and a lot more women in services sales, which just some observations I had. Not That's not how I hired, that's just how it broke out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This thing evolves through the year as well, right? Like it's yeah, I get it. So you mentioned something very interesting before, and I want to get back to it. And it's like you mentioned inclusiveness, which is another hot. It's like when I grew up in the '90s or in the early 2000s, that was nothing, but now it's a very hot topic. It's very interesting. It's like it's something that I always said in chats and talks I had before that there's something beautiful that the United States is giving the world because you guys care a lot about that more than, or at least in technology. Let's say I don't know. I might think this. That's my perception. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my perception. And I want to ask you, like, how, like, have you followed techniques now? And I want to mention as well the book of my friend Minette Norman as well, the Bold Inclusive Leader, which she keeps promoting, which makes the biggest sense right now these days, right? Did you follow any techniques, any ways, any how do you do it to make sure that all the people that were working with you remain included, right?
I think that's a big challenge because you always have the stronger personalities that become the leaders that come out, and making sure that you pull in the people that may not be as vocal, ask them questions, direct a question at them. I mean, inclusion means something even more to me because I've got my youngest daughter is deaf. And so inclusion is really important to her because most of the things that we go to don't have a sign language interpreter, or they might not have closed captioning for a movie, or you go to a Broadway show, you've got to request special place. So that's inclusion in that sense is a different definition for me. And I remember seeing this quote that said, inclusion is not only inviting somebody to the party, but asking them to dance. And I love because that really says it all, doesn't it?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, well, it's beautiful that you said. It's beautiful that you take this as and as personal as well. And I'm sure you've been able to implement this very well from that perspective. I'm happy you're sharing these things with us. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for this.
Well, I know that you're a very good friend of Anna Schlegel's, and she and I co-wrote a blog post. I want to say 2 years ago when she told me about her son with autism, and I told her about my daughter with being deaf, and we co-wrote a blog post about being moms of these children and their journey.
Oh, I read that one. I read that one. By the way, he's, I love Pau. Pau is I love. I'm sorry to say his name, but I love his daughter. I love his son.
No. And so we just pinged her before she was leaving for her new abroad, and I said we need to do an amendment to our blog post because her son now has graduated from college and he's got a job. My daughter now has her master's degree and she's a deaf education counselor and has a great job. And we've seen beautiful careers, but we supported them through their journeys, but as moms, we're still moms and we're still really proud of our kids.
I read that. I read that. That was a few years back. I remember reading that. I remember reading that. And
Yeah, it
like,
was really fun to collaborate. We were surprised how many other moms came forward and said, "Yeah, I've got a child with autism, or I've got this going on." And there was a lot of empathy from the other people out there.
yeah, 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 yeah. I'm glad you shared that back then, and I'm glad you remember this. You brought back this today. So thanks for that. I want to ask you another thing as well because I suffer from this sometimes. Can you believe it? I suffer sometimes, and I guess every professional does a little bit from imposter syndrome, right? And I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know if it's something that we millennials suffer more, or I don't know if everyone has suffered it, right? Like, have you suffered from imposter syndrome? Have you had that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, for sure. Especially, way back in the early days when I'm sitting in a room at the railroad with all men and I'm the only woman, which happened a lot, thinking, why am I here? Why am I at the table? And that happens a lot, and it still happens. But we didn't have a name for it back then. It was more of an insecurity. Why do I belong here? And then lately, the name imposter syndrome probably came about, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. But I would say everybody that I mentor has it, had they feel it. I think it's very common. And I think everyone needs to recognize they deserve a seat at the table just like anyone else. But I really try to build people up and remind them why they're special, why they're important, what they contribute, because we're our own worst enemies, doubting ourselves. How somebody will say, okay, you've got all these great qualities on your review, but then they'll talk about this one area for improvement. And what do you focus on? That one area for improvement, because you're like, oh, it's like I got a 99 but I didn't get 100. So I think that we've got to focus on all the good stuff, and then you've got an area to improve, but all those good things that you bring to the table, you have value.
You know I mean, and this comes up and from time to time. And I've expressed here that I've suffered from anxiety episodes, especially after the pandemic. A lot of us have had them, and anxiety is a lot of fear for the future, for whatever is coming, right? I've suffered. I'm not scared to share this. I've shared it before here, and one thing that is helping me to overcome that imposter syndrome, which tends to be the same, right? It seems to be on the same line, like fear of what is called psychologically imperfection as well. You have you fear for stuff. I try to look back and say like, hey, like the other day or 10 years ago or whatever, I was there and now I'm here. Uh, I If I continue learning and being flexible, I don't have anything to fear, right? That helps me.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. I also think that the older you get, the less imposter syndrome affects you, because I'm at a time in my career where I've pretty much done everything I really wanted to do. And I'm at a different stage in my season in my life. And I look back and like, wow, I mean, some of the crazy things I did, I think I would never do that again if I knew. But it all turned out just fine and how it was supposed to. And I think the next generation worries too much. I think too many people have their vision board of where they want to go, and I should only be a
Used to this as
manager.
well.
Yeah, I should only be a manager for so long. Then I need to be a director, and then I need to be VP, and then I I never had any of that. I never had a vision board. I never had a plan. I just worked really hard. I did the best I could, and then the promotions came, and I never asked for a promotion. I just I just delivered results, and then I was recognized.
Nowadays, sorry to have stopped you. Like nowadays, I think that's way magnified, probably if compared to 10 or 20 years ago, because of the impact of social media and the constant comparison that we're bombarded by. Like, hey, this thing, this that, this hot person, this other thing, or whatever. So that all these feelings have always been there, I'm guessing, right? But now they're magnified because of the exposure you get, right? I think that's my little take. No.
Well, and Javi, one of the things that, let me bring this up because I've got Local World Dublin coming up, right? And I've got an up close and personal session. So this dovetails into that because one of the reasons I started doing these sessions is because the next generation sees these high powered people at the C-suite, see, executive VPs, and they're in awe, going, "Wow, okay, how do I get there?" But they didn't know the backstory. So I just told you a lot of my backstory, which is very similar to my up close and personal sessions, where I have people. Oh, I started as a translator, and this upcoming one, I've got Kelly Beaver, who is outside the industry. She's a chief executive with Ipsos of UK Ireland. Very interesting backstory. I've got Mary Kazamias, who I'm not even sure you've heard of this company. It's a Canadian translation localization company called TRSB. She's CEO, but she started out as an assistant project manager there. She was originally a translator, assistant project manager, and over 20 years, she worked her way up to be CEO. We don't have that very many stories like that. Usually, you've got women who founded the company who are CEOs. That's pretty common amongst the 18 of the 100. Or you've got people like Veronique or Silka who were brought in from the outside to be CEO, didn't work their way up, although Veronique did work her way up at one of the companies she was with. And then you've got Mary's story, which I think is very inspiring for people to see that you can work your way up to be CEO. It's just not always an outside position. And then Lena, she's the director over there at ServiceNow. And I always think it's very good to add in a client perspective as well. So I like to have this uh, variation of backgrounds and people and experience to share their stories so that the audience can listen and be inspired. And what I found is like last year, we probably had 80% of the audience was women. And I had women CEOs, and there were 20% men. But I find that the men in the industry are very, very supportive of women leadership. They wondering why we don't have more women in these CEO positions. And I was really, I think Renato, who I've known forever, he said, I don't know why this session wasn't one of the keynotes. He thought it was that good. So I'm hoping the Dublin one will be inspirational as well. But this will be the fourth year that I've hosted sessions at Local World up close and personal. Almost all of them have been women leaders. So I have them share the personal story, the challenges, lessons learned. And one of my favorites was Paulette Hadot, who is now a VP at Virgin Voyages. And she did her story during the pandemic. And I'm going to bring her back from Monterey because she was so memorable. But she didn't even have a college degree and rose up. And she said, one of the most memorable things she said was, if your boss doesn't think you're the best thing since sliced bread, go find a new boss.
That's good. On top of that, and if I can add something, and it might be coming from my nature of you defined as hunter before, but it's I believe the difference in all of this is in the opportunity creation that one is able to do to grow and hear me out and grow in a positive way, not stepping on others' feet and helping, right? Those women, I'm sure they created amazing opportunities by themselves, which speaks like wonders about them. And if for those friends listening today, all I want to say is like go out there and create opportunities that are out there that are available. And if you think that this is not here the place, think of it as love. I always define love as a combination of two factors: love and place, right? I mean, sorry, time and place, right? It's gotta be here. It's gotta be now. So if one of them is not working, you're not getting the right opportunity, right? So go.
You create your own happiness. If you are not happy, go do something else. And I've lived by that. When I'm not happy, I made the change. You are
Yes,
empowered to
indeed.
make the change.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. If I can help you somehow in any of those upcoming sessions, I'll be happy to help you in the future. I'm always here available for that.
You'll be in Dublin.
Yeah, in Dublin, we're for those listening today, we're recording in mid-May 2024, and the next Logworld session, which Logworld is the biggest industry conference in the localization industry, is coming up in barely 3 weeks, right?
Wow.
Uh, I, Kathleen, I'm enjoying so much, and I could keep talking with you forever here, and I'm learning. And this is an amazing free mentoring session for me, for those listening. I am so thankful, but I don't want to take more of your time. I just want to ask you for final remarks. What do you want to share anything with us? How do you see what advice would you give those listening? Like, hey,
You mean the this generation of you know, one thing I'd say, have fun, right? Have fun. Don't take yourself so seriously. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Stop comparing yourself to other people and find your inner happiness. What makes you happy? And if it means that you had a big title before, but you're not happy as a executive VP somewhere, but you're happy when you're an individual contributor, go do it. Who cares what other people think? You need to start thinking about your happiness versus what others perceive you as. And I think everybody just needs to remember you're in control.
you know what I was asking out there, like I will go out with my friends and have a drink, and then I will ask my friend once, I bet you that you go to three people here in this bar and you ask them what do they want in life or are they happy, they will know how to answer. We had a couple of drinks and we went and asked that. Nobody knew how to answer. But I know how to answer that. Kathleen, you know what I want? And it's what I want now, today, which might evolve in 10 years. I want to continue being free, connecting people, traveling, and learning. And if I'm able to do that, if I'm able to do the right opportunities, wealth will come. Wealth for me, for the company, for those around me. And it should be all a win win. I'm a dreamer, but as the John Lennon song says, uh, you gotta be a dreamer, right?
Yeah. Hey, the end of the day, you've got to go out and make things happen. I mean, my number
Yeah.
one strength finder is an activator.
You may know you might say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. So if there's
Yeah,
others,
that's true. You got to end it with a song.
how can I even imagine? Jesus. Erlyn, thank you so much for being with us today. It's a real pleasure. It's an honor. I look forward to seeing you, to enjoying more time with you. And thanks for everybody for watching. Till the next time we meet in another episode of Merging Minds. Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks, Javi. It's been my pleasure.